I was the only woman there among about 10,000 men. It's a game for men. The Punjabi women traditionally would need to stay home for games like this.
I'm guessing that David Emerson crossing the floor to the Conservatives didn't help your campaign.
Not at all, Charlie. When I went door knocking, I remember people would just say, "Another liberal? Are you going to cross the floor?" Oh. There were also "De-elect Emerson" signs everywhere on people's lawns.
Welcome back to Wendy Yuan Unfiltered. This episode is called On the Campaign Trail. My name is Charlie Smith, and I've been a BC journalist for more than 30 years. My co-host, Wendy Yuan, is a successful entrepreneur, community leader, and former federal and provincial political candidate. She came to Canada from China more than 40 years ago on a CETA scholarship with just $50 in her pocket. Today, we're going to discuss Wendy's first campaign in 2008 for a seat in the Canadian Parliament, and how Wendy made connections that remain with her to this day. It's so nice to be back with you, Wendy.
Great to be back for another episode, Charlie.
Yeah, as we discussed in previous podcasts, Wendy, you were nominated as the Liberal candidate in Vancouver Kingsway in 2008. And can you start by describing what stood out for you about this riding?
Oh, I'm glad you asked me this question, Charlie. Number one, this riding is very multicultural, even back then. You know, according to Statistics Canada, more than 54% were immigrants, and about a third of the residents were Chinese.
Well, that must have made the Liberals feel good to have a candidate like you who could speak fluent Cantonese and Mandarin.
Thank you, Charlie. I certainly hope my language skills were an asset. Most of the Chinese residents were Cantonese speakers. There were also Canadian-born Chinese who spoke English and some Mandarin speakers. So when I knocked on doors, the Cantonese speakers would be very surprised that I could speak their dialect. After all, I was from Beijing. They called me a northern girl.
A northern girl, that's very amusing. How would you respond to that?
Oh, I told them that I married a person who speaks Cantonese. He, which is my husband, Ken.
Of course.
My husband, Ken, is a fourth generation Chinese Canadian. His whole family was originally from Toisan. So some of them would then say, "Oh my God, you're our sister-in-law." They immediately drew the connection. It was fun. Then I would say, "係啊，我係廣東人嘅新抱."
Oh, that's great. They must have loved it when you spoke to them in Cantonese.
Oh, yes. I would even throw a few Toisan words at them.
Brilliant. That must have been fun.
Yeah, fun indeed. Quite a few Chinese people in the riding already knew me as I was pretty active in Kingsway while I was the leader's rep. And because I was nominated early, I also had a chance to send my monthly e-newsletter, usually in the evening, to many of my supporters who live in the riding.
Well, I guess they could tell by the time that you were sending it at night. As they say in Cantonese, yat yat fan gong, man man fan gong, work all day, work all night. That's you, Wendy.
Oh my God, that's good Cantonese. Very impressive, Charlie. Yes, I was working hard day and night. I remember some voters on the doorsteps would say to me, "Wendy, when you work this hard now, imagine how hard you would work for us after you're elected as our MP."
Well, you are a hard worker. No one can dispute that. What else did you notice, though, about the demographics of Vancouver Kingsway?
Oh, just over a quarter of the residents of Vancouver Kingsway had European ancestry. They tended to be older working class folks, and a lot of them supported the NDP. Then there were about 20% classified as Southeast Asians. They were usually Vietnamese or Filipino immigrants. There are lots of Vietnamese businesses along Kingsway, and the Filipinos were often in neighborhoods around Fraser Street.
Yeah, at this point, I think I should mention that federal ridings, and you know this, Wendy, are much larger than provincial constituencies. And in those days, I seem to recall Vancouver Kingsway covered something like 21 square kilometers.
Oh, that's right, Charlie. It's a large territory, and residents speak many languages. When I was a candidate, my business card, I remember, had my name in Chinese, English, Punjabi, and Tagalog. I also learned a few words in Punjabi and Tagalog. I remember how the Filipino Canadians would smile whenever I said salamat, which means thank you. The Filipino Canadians are very sweet people. I used to be invited to many events at their community center called Multicultural Helping House. I made so many friends. One of the board members, I remember her name is Maria. She gave me a nickname, her Filipino sister.
That's amusing. It seems you were a sibling to many in the riding, but the Filipino Canadians have also tended to vote NDP historically, yet you are making inroads with them, Wendy.
Yeah, very much so, Charlie.
And in the last episode, you also talked about the help you received from the Punjabi community in the nomination race. And did they continue to assist you on the campaign when you were actually reaching out to the voters?
Yes, quite a few of them actually live in my riding. They're big families, a lot of them. Punjabi men love sports, and one of their sport is kabaddi. Kashmir Dhaliwal, a key temple and community leader whom we talked about in the last episode, would invite me to attend the kabaddi games as their VIP.
Oh, I'm familiar with kabaddi. It's like a team tag, and these big shirtless guys run toward the other side on a raid, tagging as many opponents as possible, and they try to drag them down the other side. It's very physical.
Yes, that's a very good description, Charlie. Yes, the game was a lot of fun. The interesting thing is, Charlie, I was the only woman there among about 10,000 men. It's a game for men. The Punjabi women traditionally would need to stay home for games like this.
So you were there, 10,000 men, and you're the only woman.
Yes, Charlie. Every time my campaign chair, Mike Hillman, would attend the game with me. Many know that Mike has been a long-time senior advisor for MP Suk Dhaliwal. So Mike is pretty popular in the Indo-Canadian community.
Well, I guess Mike would have been very helpful to you in these situations.
Yes, I think so. But by then, I had already become good friends with not only Kashmir, but also Manjit Bal, who has now passed away, unfortunately. He used to be very active with the Federal Liberal Party and, of course, many others. They're like my family, so I'm pretty at ease with all of them.
Well, I love your attitude, Wendy, and the fact that you have such a natural way to connect with people from all backgrounds, old or young, women or men.
Thank you, Charlie, for saying that.
But I'm also, every time you attended this kabaddi game as a VIP, would you be invited to the stage to speak or be part of the ceremony before the game started?
Yes, very much so. The game has a very formal ceremony. Before the game starts, all the players will be standing in the playing field respectfully, listen to the representatives from Khalsa Diwan Society, and that is the organizing institution. They would wish every player well. And that's also when I would be introduced and invited to the field to speak to the entire audience of 10,000 some people in the stadium. And that's also when I would be invited to walk to each team to shake every player's hand to wish them well.
Wow, they certainly gave you lots of support. That's very encouraging.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very, very blessed. The game is really popular. And over the years, I have not only made so many friends, but also developed a passion for this game.
That's wild. It sounds like they really welcomed you into the community. And I know you've also been attending the Vaisakhi parade in South Vancouver for many years.
Yes. This is to celebrate the spring harvest back in Punjab. It's a huge event in Vancouver, and I've gone to so many of these parades over the years. It all started when I first became involved in politics. I've attended with many political party leaders over the years, like Stéphane Dion, Justin Trudeau, Christy Clark, and Kevin Falk, and so on.
Yes, politicians of all political stripes from all levels of governments. would attend this much anticipated annual festival. And I've noticed on election years, there are even more politicians.
That's a good observation, Charlie. It's a wonderful event. The community members make delicious Indian food in their homes, and then they would set up tables during the parade and give these treats away for free.
Yeah, I really admire the families for doing this. There's also lots of bhangra dancing and floats. It's very colorful. And the first float is always the Sikh Holy Scriptures.
Oh yeah, that's so true. There are so many things, Charlie, that I've learned and experienced in Canada from living in Montreal and Vancouver. I believe that the real strength of Canada is its diversity. With all the wisdom and knowledge that comes from around the world, I think of Metro Vancouver as a multicultural paradise.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's truly an amazing and fascinating place to live, Wendy.
Yeah, this has been my biggest takeaway from politics, making those great connections and those friendships. I don't think there is another country on this planet like Canada.
Very well said, Wendy. Now, let's talk about how you felt on the campaign trail. You did a lot of political fundraising for other candidates. Did you also have to do this for yourself?
That's a good question, Charlie. Soon after Stéphane Dion became the leader, I held my own fundraiser, a first fundraiser for my campaign. It was in Seasons in the Park, a beautiful restaurant in Queen Elizabeth Park in my riding. I was really happy that Senator Jack Austin agreed to be the guest speaker. Senator Austin was a powerhouse in Liberal politics, and I'm very grateful that he took time to support me.
Yeah, and Jack Austin was also a key official for Canada's very first trade mission to China, and this was following the normalization of ties between the two countries. And Jack Austin was also Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. And then he was appointed a senator in 1975, later became government leader in the Senate. But I think his greatest legacy is his long-standing advocacy for more trade with Asia.
That's so true, Charlie. Senator Jack Austin was also the president of the Canada-China Business Council back then. Plus, he was a member of the federal cabinet. That fundraiser attracted lots of big names in the Liberal Party and in the Chinese-Canadian business community. It was a real success.
I'm so glad that your first fundraiser was such a success, Wendy, after you became a candidate. The fact that the Liberal rank and file and colleagues, as well as the business leaders, were all supporting you, it shows how much people wanted you to win as a deserving candidate. So I'm wondering, what did you do for a fundraising encore, Wendy?
Oh, thank you, Charlie. In 2007, we did another fundraiser at a very popular Chinese restaurant on Fraser Street. That's a year after I was nominated. It's called the Golden Swan. My friend MP for Vancouver South, Wuzhou Dusange, and his lovely wife, Remy, attended, and Wuzhou spoke. Also, Richmond MP Raymond Chan and Senator Mobina Jaffer, who supported Mason Low, also showed up.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yes, interesting indeed. I remember that a major Filipino community leader attended as well. His name was Thomas Avendano. Everyone called him Tatai Tom. He was almost 100 years old, very respected. Tom was one of the founders of the Multicultural Helping House, a community service organization that serves the Filipino immigrants. I remember also Ken Tong, the chair of Success back then, was also in attendance. Also Johnny Fong, the famous community leader, attended as well. There were also many other community and business leaders from Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Indo-Canadian communities. The list goes on. I hope these pictures will give you an idea about what a wonderful fundraiser it was.
Yeah, it really sounds like you were making lots of connections as a candidate.
Oh, that's the joy of being a candidate. Our biggest fundraiser was at the Florida restaurant in 2008. And that was around Lunar Chinese New Year. This time, my friend and former Prime Minister Paul Martin was our guest of honor. That fundraiser attracted thousands of people. Every table was sold out. I remember some supporters simply showed up last minute to demand a table, and we had to accommodate that by setting the table temporarily almost at the corridor outside the room.
Well, this gives new meaning to standing room only.
That is funny, Charlie. And all major media in town were present.
That's really impressive, Wendy. Your reputation as an outstanding fundraiser exists for a reason. I also saw a video on YouTube with you, and you're standing beside Paul Martin when he was speaking very highly of you. What was that event all about?
What a great event. What a great event. What a great event this is to see all of these candidates, to see Ujjal up here, to see all of you, to make sure that Vancouver Kingsway elects Wendy Yuan.
Oh, that was a big rally. I was on stage with Paul, yes, along with other candidates. And Paul very graciously gave a major media scrum with all my big Wendy Yuan signs all over the room. I was standing right beside him.
Wow, that's so encouraging coming from a former prime minister.
Absolutely, Charlie. I felt very humbled. It's worth mentioning that although Michael Ignatieff and Bob Rae didn't win in the leadership race, they both graciously came and visited Vancouver Kingsway and campaigned for me. Michael Ignatieff joined me at the main day street fair in the riding, and Bob Rae had a roundtable discussion with some key Chinese community leaders.
That is indeed gracious of both of them. It shows that they valued you as an important member of the Liberal team, Wendy.
Yes, quite a few veteran Liberal MPs also made special trips to Vancouver Kingsway during the campaign to join me at community roundtables. One of them was Dominic LeBlanc. He's the one who's now leading the Canadian trade delegations with the United States. Dominic met with key community leaders to pick their brains on issues concerning all of us in the community. He was in charge of drafting the Liberal policy book back then.
Wow, that's really good that you made that connection.
Yes. Another was Liberal parliamentarian Dr. Carolyn Bennett. She was also a cabinet minister. The topic of the roundtable discussion, I remember, was on services for seniors. Dr. Bennett is now Canada's ambassador to Denmark. I also hosted a community roundtable with another MP, and he was the former cabinet minister, John McCallum, on the issues of economy.
John McCallum. Many Canadians know him as the former chief economist with CIBC, also former citizenship and immigration minister, and he served as Canada's ambassador to China.
Yes, he was a very popular MP. Another roundtable I hosted was with Jeff Regan on foreign credential recognition.
That's a lot of MPs coming to your riding to support you.
Yes, I'm very, very humbled and grateful. Also, the Liberals held a debate in Vancouver during their 2006 leadership race. And before the leadership debate began, the party arranged a special introduction for me as their candidate in Vancouver Kingsway.
Well, I'm betting there must have been a lot of cheers in the room for you.
Yes, in fact, the introduction was a surprise to me, Charlie. It was covered in the Chinese media after. For me, it was a real honor.
Yeah, Wendy, you were actually the first Liberal candidate in the country that was nominated. And there's another first that some people don't know. You were also the first candidate in Liberal Party history to be approved by an interim leader. And I think that goes to show how much the Liberals wanted to win back Vancouver Kingsway.
Yes, I felt very honored, Charlie. At the same time, I also felt there was a lot of pressure.
Well, I'm guessing that David Emerson crossing the floor to the Conservatives didn't help your campaign.
Not at all, Charlie. When I went door knocking, I remember people would just say, "Another Liberal? Are you going to cross the floor?" Some said that, you seem like a good candidate, Wendy, but they couldn't vote Liberal after David Emerson crossed the floor, they say. There were also de-elect Emerson signs everywhere on people's lawns. But some of those voters had my sign on their lawn saying, "Elect Wendy Yuan."
That's quite the contrast.
Yeah.
At the same time, you were developing a high profile, though, Wendy, especially after you were the leaders rep in BC.
Yes, and there was a lot of attention from the national media. I remember one of the national broadcasters came out to do a special coverage just about Vancouver Kingsway and its uniqueness.
Well, I recall that Vancouver Kingsway was definitely one of the most watched ridings nationwide in that 2008 election. However, many candidates from your party, including in Kingsway, faced challenges, and that's because your leader, Stéphane Dion, was not doing so well in the polls, particularly in English-speaking Canada.
Yes, I liked Stéphane, whose first language was French. When he spoke English, it was with a strong accent. But I was used to this accent because I lived in Montreal. Many of our employees spoke English with a strong French-Canadian accent. But because of his accent and his vocabulary in English, he didn't really connect with as many voters as he would like.
Yeah, as I look back, it seems like there was some accent discrimination going on. But there was also a problem with Liberal Party unity after such a hard-fought leadership campaign.
Yes, because of all of these things, the Emerson effect, the three-way race, Stéphane Dion's accent, and internal Liberal politics, I fell short of being elected in 2008.
But Wendy, you ended up coming a close second with 13,164 votes. I remember Don Davies of the NDP won with 15,933 votes. But the surprising thing, and you alluded to it with the three-way race, was the federal Conservative votes reached 12,419, making it a three-way race. And in previous elections, the Liberals' main competition came from the NDP in Kingsway. The Conservative support in this riding was never this strong.
You're right, Charlie. I was certainly not expecting a three-way race.
So how did it feel to work so hard and come so close, yet not quite get over the finish line first?
I was quite sad on election night along with my family and my team, but I was prepared for the result because the Liberals were not doing well in the national polls. That night, the Liberals only won 77 seats, and that was the party's lowest total since 1984. So I wasn't alone. Lots of Liberals went down to defeat that night.
Yeah, and the Conservatives, we remember, retained control of the government under Stephen Harper.
Yeah, our team tried its best. To this day, I really appreciate all the support from my volunteers and donors. Political campaigns are not about one person, as you know. It's really about a team effort.
That's a wise way of looking at things, Wendy, and a great way to close this episode. I think in 2008, after Emerson defected, Stéphane Dion as leader, even a Canadian megastar would have had trouble getting elected as a Liberal in Vancouver Kingsway.
That's an interesting way to put it, but I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, in our next episode, we can discuss whether you had any other plans after this election. I'm really looking forward to that. Until then, I'm Charlie Smith. My co-host is Wendy Yuan. If you like what you see on Wendy Yuan Unfiltered, subscribe to the podcast and tell your friends. You can also follow this podcast on social media channels listed below. I hope you can join us for our next bi-weekly episode. Until then, take care.